There's a new Matrix movie coming out. Tobey Maguire might be back as Spider-Man. We're only a couple of years removed from the last Shenmue game. Now, if only there was a new Castlevania game starring Alucard, I'd be convinced it was the early 2000s all over again. What? Okay, so let's talk about Grimoire of Souls, the latest entry in the long-running and thought to be somewhat dead Castlevania series. But much like Dracula himself, it seems death is only the beginning for Konami's once flagship series. And like the creatively bankrupt, money-oriented health club owners we know them to be, they've wheeled out Castlevania's corpse for another round, this time exclusive to Apple Arcade. But while it might look at first glance like a wholesome new entry, don't be fooled. Grimoire of Souls is unfortunately only a few steps removed from the now infamous Konami pachinko machines. And while it might seem like its existence on a platform that is largely free of microtransactions would indicate different, its original design as a Castlevania-themed gacha mobile game is all too plain to see within only minutes of loading it up. Set sometime after the events of Order of Ecclesia, Grimoire of Souls ignores the Lords of Shadow trilogy and instead continues the story where things had left off in the DS era. Alucard is living as Genya Arikado, a name he adopted in more recent years as he worked as part of a government task force to take down Dracula for good. However, despite this game being set after the previous DS titles, for some reason it still looks like Victorian Europe, and everyone's dressed like it's the 1880s. While hilarious, to be honest, I was personally willing to let this go until I realised it was part of a much larger attempt to play on fan nostalgia, but we'll get to that in a bit. Living in his totally modern house in the middle of the woods for some reason, Genya... You know what, I'm just going to call him Alucard. Alucard receives a letter from a lady named Lucy Westenra. Lucy is a member of a group named Elgos, an organisation founded shortly after Dracula's supposed final defeat, charged with sealing and guarding both his material possessions and a host of grimoires, magically charged texts established to document the history of all heroes who have bested the dark vampiric lord, as well as all the events that surrounded their victories. However, such texts are now the host to the very evils which they document, and the many villains and demonic creatures of the series past have begun to once again spill out and gain sentience, hell-bent on reviving their master. Luckily for us, Elgos are able to also use their magic to begin resurrecting heroes from the past too, adding to Alucard's allies and combining their powers to once again destroy the legions of beasts and monstrosities before they spill forth once more unto the world. Now, this premise is actually a really interesting one, and could have worked as a great device to allow for a real celebration of the series, encompassing all its best moments and characters in one epic saga, and reveling in its rich storied history. Unfortunately, in this instance, it is instead used only as hollow nostalgia and a method to allow for copious amounts of pointless unlocks. Characters appear with little fanfare or build-up, stages are no different regardless of who you play as, and none feel like their original counterparts. Moreover, the more the game goes on, the more the story becomes a host of plot devices and less a coherent tale. It's all such a shame. I don't need Tolkien levels of narrative prowess in my Castlevania games, but just something a little less cynical would have sufficed. It's a great premise and has a few interesting and satisfying moments, but much like the rest of the game, it ends up leaving you hollow, feeling more like a new skin for a mobile gacha model Konami have used thousands of times before than a genuine attempt to make a new entry in the Castlevania series. So before I go any further, it's probably worth catching up those who don't know on how this game came to be. Basically, Grimoire of Souls started as a free-to-play, microtransaction-filled mobile game, which was at one point set to release in most territories. However, at some point during its development, after it had been released in its original form in several territories, Konami cancelled the game and shut it down. Now, at this point, it was never released in my territory, so I'm unable to tell you if it played any different or had any other standout elements or differences from this Apple Arcade version. But despite it being re-engineered and re-released on this new platform, what I can tell you is that it has not shaken off its mobile shell. Despite the seeming removal of all microtransactions to match the Apple Arcade model, there is so much gacha, stretched out content, rinse and repeat, pointless multiple currency bullshit going on in Grimoire of Souls that it's hard to know where to even start. There's summoning points and daily rewards and login rewards and 1 per day crap and recomplete this quest to earn another pointless item and go on this random RNG system and so on and so on. It's endless. A good example of this design philosophy in effect would be the story progression. Every mission has 3 challenges that range from kill all the enemies to beat it within this amount of time to find all the chests, etc. This means that you'll be replaying stages multiple times before you can progress. Now, it's not that a structure like this is inherently bad, but it's just very mobile. Bite-sized experiences to get some currency, to unlock a new thing, to replay the level again, to get more currency, etc. Also, all of this has been balanced with microtransactions in mind. The point in these games is to make shit laborious, so that you're incentivized to spend money and speed things up. But with the microtransactions removed, everything just feels extremely stretched out. Also, those who are hoping for an open world map to explore and fill out, a la most Castlevanias since Symphony of the Night, will also be disappointed. The game is broken up into very short stages, with random and annoying difficulty spikes once again thrown in to make you upgrade your gear before you progress. On top of this, while there is some variety in the various characters' movesets, unfortunately the game just doesn't feel nice to play. I played on a Mac with a controller, which I assumed would be the optimum way to experience a game like this, but alas not. Characters are sluggish and slow, and very unresponsive. It kind of feels like they're moving underwater. This forces the use of the dodge dash to feel like you're moving at any kind of pace. The problem with that, however, is that characters insist on performing the same audio cue every single time you hit the dash button. It's maddening. Taken together, what you're left with is a game that isn't fun to play and also feels caught between the worst parts of 2 conflicting design philosophies. It's structured like a mobile gacha game, but it's not. It's supposed to be a single-player Apple Arcade experience. If more time and care had been taken, I really feel like Grimoire of Souls could have been repurposed into something fun. As it is now though, it just isn't one thing or the other. And when you're not a fan of its original mobile gacha style form anyway, there's little here left to enjoy. So regarding presentation, things start off somewhat promising here, with some nice 2D art cutscenes that set the scene well. However, once the game starts, things take a bit of a turn for the worse. Much like the only real Castlevania game we've got in the last few years, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, Grimoire of Souls is a 2.5D game, with 3D environments and characters being played out in the 2D style. Now, while the environments actually look okay, hosting many elements from the series' past and helping to do them relative justice in their new, more 3-dimensional form, the same unfortunately cannot be said for a lot of the game's animations, which are decidedly hit and miss. Some of the attack and enemy animations are great, but some of the movement animations, particularly those of main characters, just look a little strange. The voice acting is also a little problematic, with a hilarious opening narration that carries with it enough charm to just about get away with it, replaced quickly by annoying and overused battle dialogue, such as the aforementioned dash lines. Having said this, there really isn't too much spoken dialogue in the game, with much of the conversations being brief written text. In terms of music and sound effects, both are some of the most standout qualities of the game. However, much of this is because they are repurposed from the series' past. There is original content here, and it's pretty good, but really all the best stuff is content any fan will have already experienced. Like I'm sure many out there watching this review, I was actually a little excited when I heard that Grimoire of Souls was coming to Apple Arcade. While I am loving Bloodstained, and had already mourned for Castlevania along with Konami's other casualties, I still held out a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, we might get some of the old magic back. Because no matter how good the likes of Bloodstained is, it's still in many ways an imitation. And lest we forget, Castlevania, as an IP, was responsible, in my opinion anyway, for some of the greatest games of all time. Unfortunately, my excitement was all in vain. In keeping with Konami's recent MO, this latest offering is so blatantly another gacha-style cash grab, only a few rungs above the Silent Hill pachinko machines. Its attempt to leverage the nostalgia built from almost 20 years of quality ends up feeling like even more cynical weaponization and monetization of the IP and its legacy. It doesn't play particularly well, it doesn't utilize its premise beyond using it to facilitate more hollow, pointless systems, and its structure and design have been rendered a mess, both by its origins as a monetized mobile game and its repurposing onto a new service it was never designed for. If you were in one of its original release regions, played the original release and enjoyed it, maybe there's something here for you. And if you have Apple Arcade, you can always give it a go. But as a lifelong Castlevania fan, the experience just left me sad. It seems much like the shuffling corpses we have often faced in the series over the years. This attempt at reanimation is completely and utterly soulless.